In November, Ticketmaster dominated headlines for their failed handling of Taylor Swift's Eras tour. Millions of fans waited hours in online queues just for the website to crash or the pre-sale code to show an error. Others finally made it through the line to find that bought-up tickets had already jumped in price to thousands of dollars. Frustrated and disappointed, thousands took to social media to complain. In a matter of days, the many problems with the platform were exposed.
I think the Taylor Swift debacle, and I think we could consider it a debacle, is really symptomatic of other problems that we have seen emerge from the Live Nation Ticketmaster monopoly. That monopoly starts in about 2010, even though before the merger, Ticketmaster had significant market power in ticketing.
That's Diana Moss, president of the American Antitrust Institute. She's an expert on competition policy and regulation and is an adjunct faculty member in the Department of Economics at the University of Colorado at Boulder.
The merger itself put together all of these levels in the live event supply chain, from artist management to concert promotion to venue operation to ticketing. So this is full spectrum coverage of everything from the artist all the way down to the music fan. And by creating a vertical merger like that, there are very strong incentives, oftentimes, and certainly in the case of Live Nation Ticketmaster, for the company to engage in practices that squeezes out competition, right? Competition anywhere in that supply chain.
According to Moss, Ticketmaster and Live Nation currently hold a whopping 80% of the market share in primary ticketing and 60% in concert promotion. Without much competition, there's little incentive to innovate or provide high-quality products and services to consumers. In Ticketmaster's case, their software was incapable of handling the large uptick in users for Swift's new tour, leaving many fans empty-handed. But with so many people burned from this experience, why has demand on the site stayed largely the same? The answer is simple. There's really no other option.
I think it would have looked very different if they weren't the monopoly that they are today, right? So you would, first of all, fans would have had other services to go to. So if they saw they were behind 2,000 people, they could probably go to another ticketing service if they existed. They no longer have an incentive to invest in their infrastructure and invest in the actual quality of their product because they know fans are going to be forced onto their platform. So if you see healthy competition, then people are held accountable to actually create a product that people want to engage with, and that's a positive experience.
That's Krista Brown, a senior policy analyst at the American Economic Liberty Project. She adds that while the Ticketmaster mess is a recent example of a monopoly in action, it's just one out of the many.
I wish it was an isolated incident. You really see them kind of at every turn. So especially during the pandemic, monopolies were highlighted in ways that kind of related to the supply chain. With baby formula and the crisis there, we really only had one supplier once they're in Michigan. And once that facility had issues, health issues, and had to shut down, the entire baby formula supply to our country was put at risk. And it's currently being addressed in railroads. We talk about it a lot with airlines and agriculture. It's in our healthcare. And it is a problem that, fortunately, the current antitrust regulators are very aware of.
Monopolies often result in high prices, low-quality products, and poor customer service. But it's not just consumers that get the short end of the stick, it's also employees. Last fall, news broke that Kroger, the second-largest grocery chain in the U.S., and Albertsons, the fourth largest, are planning to merge this year. If the deal goes through, Kroger, with 5,000 locations, would by far be the largest grocery retailer.
That will create a very powerful buyer for all of the different labor forces that are employed by those two companies. Those workers will lose a lot of their bargaining power with this larger combined retail grocer. And so we could expect workers' wages to fall. We could see their benefits fall. We could see a lack of options and choices for workers. So that's harmful. And that should be constrained by enforcement of our antitrust laws.
This merger not only affects workers, but countless mom-and-pop grocers. These smaller businesses can't compete with bare-bone prices at Kroger or Albertsons because they don't buy as much from manufacturers.
We have seen that rates of market entry by small business, which is really the backbone of the US economy, the rates of entry by small business are decreasing. It's harder for small businesses to get a foothold in markets and to go in and compete with disruptive technology and lower costs and better business models.
And this is exactly what current merger laws are supposed to prevent against. Brown says that these policies exist, but enforcement is practically non-existent.
There are two kind of very fundamental laws. There's the Sherman Act, which it makes monopolization and the abuse of that monopoly power illegal. And then there's the Clayton Act, which gets at this merger law. So if a merger or acquisition could lead to a substantially lessening competition, that is also illegal. But regulators have really just had very light touch enforcement, if at all, over the past couple of decades. So although the laws exist, they are not being enforced to their fullest. And I think that kind of has led to a place where today we are having these debates in Congress and within the regulatory bodies of, do we need to update these laws? Because they have not been upheld to their fullest extent. And we now are faced with monopolies in some of the most critical industries.
If the Clayton Act had been enforced by Congress, then most likely the Ticketmaster and Live Nation merger would have failed. But like many others, these two companies were able to bypass the law through corporate lobbying.
Historically, it's kind of boiled down to the consumer welfare theory, which really gets at, if this is not going to increase prices for consumers, then it's not a problem. And we should not get in the way of quote unquote free market. But that is not how they were set up. That's not how the laws were in. It's not how we have historically, prior to the 1970s, thought about building a healthy and functioning economy. But it's been kind of a slow disintegration of policy and the corporate power that now infiltrates our policy. And one aspect that speaks to all of that is the amount of lobbying power that now these corporations have within Congress and within our regulatory bodies to limit the incentive for regulators to actually uphold the law.
Brown says that there are people in D.C. trying to make a difference. One is Jonathan Cantor, the Assistant Attorney General in the Department of Justice Antitrust Division. Cantor is cracking down on big tech firms like Google, Amazon, Meta, and Apple that are growing with little regulation. Another change maker is Senator Amy Klobuchar, who introduced legislation to increase funding to antitrust agencies like the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice. The proposed bill also calls on Congress to strengthen and clarify existing antitrust legislation. While this is a step in the right direction, Moss says we need the full support of Congress. This means an end to the era of bending to lobbyists.
The only way to really get at reversing some of this damage is to have really aggressive antitrust enforcers who are going to block mergers that are harmful and illegal under the antitrust laws, and who are not simply going to let them through subject to say, well, divest this little asset over here or adhere to these conditions and you can have your merger. The answer is to go to federal court to block the mergers completely. And remember, this all sounds great, but these are heavy lifts. It's a heavy lift for the agencies to bring these cases. They do end up in court, often for months. They're heavily litigated, and certainly the outcomes can vary. But we do need strong enforcers who are committed to doing that.
Above all, both Moss and Brown emphasize that it's important that representatives understand the full impact of these monopolies on Americans and free market business.
It's a serious public policy problem in the United States right now. It really cuts to the core of our market-based system, the importance of competition, the importance of protecting consumers and workers. And it is a top-line public policy issue in the U.S.
To find info on how to contact your House rep or senator about this issue, visit viewpointsradio.org. Also head to our website to learn more about our guests, Diana Moss and Krista Brown. This segment was written and produced by Associate Producer Grace Galante. Our executive producer is Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price. This segment was brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Updated COVID vaccines have arrived just in time for the season that brings us all together. Find updated COVID vaccines at vaccines.gov. We can do this. Coming up on Viewpoints.
They're on a very fixed light-dark cycle, even in space, even though they're going around the Earth every 90 minutes, and so their day-night cycle is a 90-minute cycle.
The ways in which astronauts sleep in space. Then,
it's indescribable what a person goes through as an innocent man being charged with very, very serious crimes.
Every year, innocent people in the U.S. are convicted of serious crimes they didn't commit and sentenced to years in prison. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.